Arizona gets a lot of people wondering what the heck they saw. UFO watchers are calling it a dramatic event.
And folks who witnessed this strange sighting are calling it simply unexplainable. News 15's Bill Spencer joins us live overlooking the skies of Phoenix. And Bill, a lot of our viewers who called last night are wondering what those objects were. Any answers yet?
We don't have any answers, Paul and Robin, but I'll tell you this. It's like clockwork. Every day in the valley, someone will call the police reporting seeing a UFO. Strange lights in the sky moving in strange ways. But it is very rare for thousands of people to call and report seeing the same lights in the same spot at the same time. It happened last night, and eyewitnesses who saw it say it's like nothing they've ever seen before.
I was like, holy crap, look! And it was a perfect triangle just floating across the sky, way up there. Aliens, first thing that I thought, but it scared the heck out of me.
It isn't exactly close encounters of the third kind, but this series of strange lights, which appeared in the northern Arizona sky last night, has thousands of people scratching their heads.
I think it was a spaceship of some sort, because, I mean, I've never seen anything like that before.
Last night, shortly after 8 p.m., hundreds, maybe thousands of Arizonans reported seeing a triangular-shaped object with 3 distinct lights streaking across the sky at incredible speed.
Just right up there, and then it flew like right across over and down that way.
According to reports, the sightings began at about 8:20 just north of Prescott, with the lights then moving rapidly from Prescott to Glendale to Tempe to Chino Valley, and finally arriving in Tucson at about 9 o'clock. The lights traveled close to 200 miles in about 40 minutes. Even a commercial airline pilot here at Sky Harbor Airport reported seeing the lights last night. He radioed the tower just after takeoff, telling them that the object was directly above him. That means that air traffic controllers in the tower should have picked the object up on their radar screens. And yet they say they saw nothing. Over the past 10 years, there have been literally hundreds of sightings all over the country, especially here in the Southwest. But this sighting is different. The UFO group MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, calls this the most dramatic sighting in Arizona this decade. Now, we have checked into it. We called the FAA, Sky Harbor Airport, and Luke Air Force Base for some kind of an explanation as to these strange lights, and so far, we have nothing. Paul and Robin.
Phil, you said over the last 10 years there's been a lot of significant sightings across the country. When was the last one here in the Southwest?
Well, according to MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, about 2 weeks ago, they say there was a series of 4 golden discs or flying saucers that were hovering just above Phoenix. That's the first I've heard of it.
All right, well, we'll be keeping our eyes up on the sky.
A little spooky that they couldn't find it on radar. Bill, thanks very much.
Okay.
Live, local, late breaking. You're watching News 15 at 10.
Do these lights belong to visitors from outer space? Hundreds of people across the valley think it's a distinct possibility. Good evening, I'm Mark Bailey.
And I'm Robin Sewell. Thanks for joining us. We start tonight with those strange dots of light that were the talk of the town. Tonight, News 15's Paul Johnsich is with a group of people who saw the lights last night, and they say they've seen similar patterns before, Paul?
Right, Robin and Mark. The military says the lights over Arizona last night were flares, but the people who saw the lights last night say they couldn't have been flares. The lights were too bright. They were in the sky too long. They say that this was something else. In fact, these people are waiting here to see if the lights return. About a dozen people have come to this lonely patch of desert to look for UFOs. Their telescopes and cameras are fixed towards the sky while they wait for the strange lights to return.
Last night I seen something extraordinary.
Tom King has been watching the skies over Phoenix since October of 1995. Last night he saw something he cannot explain.
These lights were sitting stationary. They just came on in place. They lined up in a formation. They did not look like flares, and they didn't move around at all like conventional aircraft.
The unusual lights last night caught the eyes of hundreds of people. This video was shot by someone else in another part of the city. At least one pilot radioed to the Sky Harbor Tower that the lights passed directly over his aircraft, but the tower saw no sign of anything on radar.
I know they were a couple of miles away from me, and I know they were at least 30 feet in diameter,
and they were hovering and moving slowly towards Phoenix.
Some say one or two of the lights have appeared every night for the past 4 nights. UFO enthusiasts all over the country are beginning to talk about it on the internet. And the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, calls it, quote, the most dramatic series of sightings in Arizona in a decade. Whatever it was, it has more than a few Phoenicians watching the skies tonight. Now, if you just look at the videotape, you might wonder what's so unusual about 3 or 4 bright lights in the sky, what with so many planes coming and going from Sky Harbor Airport. But the people who saw the lights will say the lights were orange, they were bright, and they were big, and they were like nothing they've ever seen before. And it's important to point out that just as fast as word of these strange lights have spread, explanations have been tossed about, that they were flares, that there were planes flying in formation. But Mark and Robin, we checked with the FAA today, we checked with Sky Harbor, and we checked with Luke Air Force Base, and there's been no official explanation of those strange bright lights last night. In the meantime, these people are going to stay here all the way through midnight, thinking that those lights might return, and their cameras are on ready.
Well, you're right, Paul. With no definitive answer, it still remains a mystery. Okay, thank you.
This Earth. Have we had some visitors recently? The buzz is very big in the desert Southwest, where it's really never gone away after some weird happenings in the skies over Phoenix recently. And here's NBC's Robert Hager.
This is one of several home videos recorded that night last March. A few say they saw the lights as far as 100 miles north of Phoenix. Many more saw them over the city or to the south, as seen here. At the Phoenix airport, there was nothing unusual on the radar, but controller Bill Grava and his colleagues could see the lights.
They were amber-colored, very bright, and on a scale of 1 to 5, with an airplane light being maybe 2, these are 4.5 at least.
With an Air Force base nearby, many assumed the lights were burning flares suspended from parachutes, but the military says it had only routine fighter flights flying that night and no flares. Some, like Tim and Bobby Lee, claim they saw even more.
Something was there. It was a structure. It was going 35 miles an hour. It was huge. It didn't make a sound. And you tell me what can do that.
Since all this comes just a year after the movie Independence Day depicted an alien invasion, comes just as Roswell, New Mexico prepares for the 50th anniversary of what many UFO buffs swear was the crash of a flying saucer there in 1947, and coincides with UFO cover stories in the current Time magazine and Popular Science as well. It's no surprise then the new Phoenix phenomenon would excite UFO believers there, such as Jim De La Tosa.
What an interesting possibility that extraterrestrials know that all this discussion is happening, and they did a show for us. Just a possibility.
De La Tosa, who has a computer graphics lab, has created imaginative video simulations of what he believes various eyewitnesses could have been seeing over Phoenix that night. But air traffic controller Grava senses a more earthly explanation.
It's either flares that are very bright in intensity. It's kind of hard to believe, though, that they would be on the same plane, the same distance, the same spacing apart, and the same intensity. Or it's something that the military is experimenting, testing that we don't know about.
A secret operation, an elaborate hoax, or a spacecraft with little green pilots. Regardless, it's the stuff of Hollywood, coming not to a theater near you, but playing now in the Southwest desert. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
Back here on Earth, that's Nightly News for Wednesday, tonight on Internight on MSNBC.
Peter Davenport at Seattle's UFO Reporting Center, a place that gathers reports from all of you on what's going on out there. And what's going on out there tonight includes some rather strange occurrences in Arizona. Here is Peter Davenport. Peter.
Good evening, Art.
Hi. What in the world is going on?
Well, I'm not sure myself, but it's been a very busy night in the skies above Arizona tonight. Just about 3 hours ago, we started taking calls, nose to tail, from all over Arizona. The first call came in from a retired police officer who lives in Paulden, Arizona.
Paulden.
That's, I guess, about 150 or 200 miles straight north of Phoenix, north of Prescott, Arizona.
Right.
He was out with his family driving. They saw a cluster of lights. It looked like 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them in a large cluster, followed by a single lone light behind them, moving from northwest to southeast approximately. That was the first of what turned out to be many calls. I've taken about 18 calls tonight from Arizona. Those objects were seen over Paulden. A minute later, they were seen over Prescott, Arizona.
A minute later.
That's, it's got to be at least 50, maybe more like 100 miles between Paulden and Prescott, Arizona. 2 or 3 minutes later, they were seen all over Phoenix, Arizona, over Glendale, over Tempe, and literally the calls were coming in on top of each other.
Listen, I can tell you it's true because I sat down here at the board just before the program, began to answer a few calls, and the Arizona calls were frantic. Art, you should see what's going on down here.
Yeah.
So what are people saying? What is the best description of these objects so far?
Yeah, there have been multiple descriptions, but the people up in northern Arizona saw lights that were distinctly red. By the time they'd gotten down to Phoenix, they were white, the color of stars, bluish white, people described. But, excuse me, I'm suffering from a cold here tonight. But
so are most of the people I know.
Yeah. It is still not clear to me whether we're dealing with one extremely large object or whether, in point of fact, there were 5 objects. I think the best report, one of the best we took from Phoenix, was from an amateur astronomer who was looking at these objects. He apparently has very good vision. He was able to discern that each one of the 5 lights that he was looking at itself individually was made up of 2 lights, 2 faint lights. It looks to me as though we are dealing with a fleet of objects. He reported, or another observer reported, that when one turned, they all turned together, as if by the same command. Now, I don't know if that's changing orientation of lights on a single large object or what. We rarely really know what we're dealing with here, but there's no doubt but what there was a dramatic sighting over Arizona.
All right, did anybody take out a camera?
One person that we talked to went for his camcorder, and by the time he got back a minute later, everything was gone.
Yep.
Most people did not see these things for more than 2 or 3 minutes. One party said he estimated that it was 10 minutes that he'd been watching it, but he wasn't sure. That's really not enough time to go dig out the old camcorder from your steamer trunk. And
I know it.
But most people should prepare themselves and get their, if they own camcorders, get the batteries charged, always keep fresh tape in it, and be ready to catch something on film if you see it. But interestingly, excuse me, we took 2 other dramatic sightings from the state of Washington. I have no idea whether these were in any way related to the sightings over Arizona, but we had one object reported from Castle Rock, Washington tonight by the 911 facility down in that locale. There was a brilliant, intensely bright flash followed by a huge veil of cascading sparks coming down out of the sky. We don't know what it was, but we've been taking a lot of calls very similar to that over the last roughly 2 or 3 weeks, I would say. Certainly something's going on, Art. I just thought your listeners tonight would like to get a fresh report of what was seen to occur over Arizona.
Okay, how long ago, when was the last reported sighting in Arizona?
The last reported sighting was at about 8:35 p.m. tonight.
Okay.
That's Arizona time.
Well, a lot of people, I guess, enjoyed it. I hope they enjoyed it because I got a lot of calls. You got a lot of calls.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Yeah. One thing I might add, if we have just a second more.
Sure.
I tried to contact Luke Air Force Base tonight. They took a lot of calls on this. 2 people reported to us that as the objects moved to the south, generally over Phoenix, people saw 2 what appeared to be military jets coming from the northwest or maybe the north, flying right at the formation of objects. And the objects suddenly disappeared very shortly thereafter, and the 2 apparently jet aircraft, they could be heard to be jet aircraft, turned around and went back to the northwest. That's in the direction of Luke Air Force Base, if I'm not mistaken.
Luke didn't want to talk to you, huh?
No, I called Luke just less than 30 minutes ago. I was on the line to Luke. I was told by a staff sergeant in the command post there that he could not put me in touch with a commissioned officer at Luke Air Force Base. He represented that he was the commander of Luke Air Force Base tonight.
Really?
I spent 4 years in the military. I know you
What's
did.
going on here?
That gentleman, that staff sergeant, may have been telling me the exact truth, but times must have changed since I was in the military.
Well, if he's the commander of the base, then I'll tell you the cutbacks have been underrated, underreported.
March 13th, 1997. This event called Lights Over Phoenix. What did you see?
Well, I saw a huge craft just kind of come right over Squaw Peak. That was, it was just breathtaking. And I'm not sure about the date. You've got a better memory
March
for the
13th.
dates than I do. Yeah.
But there was no, like the Clinton day, no.
No. No, I was on a strict diet. No, I'm serious. I'm serious now. That unquestionably it was a UFO, which means unidentified flying object.
Right. Doesn't mean we're being visited.
Well, it's nothing like anything I've ever seen.
And you're an Air Force guy.
Yeah, yeah, and a pilot. Got a lot of hours flying, so it was pretty breathtaking. And I'll never forget. I snuck out to see it, without DPS, which I'm not supposed to be driving my own car and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, but I told Ann what I was doing. I was going to go up to Squaw Peak and see what everybody was, clamoring about. And when I walked in the front door, she looked at me, and I was apparently just, normally I'm fair complected and pale anyway, right? And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "she looked like a ghost. What did you see?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what I saw, but it was really something, and I'm not going to talk about it." And
wow.
So,
did it frighten you?
No, I think I was kind of in awe, really,
How big?
Bigger than anything I've ever seen in the sky.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. And it was hard to define because of the light in terms of the size, but it was absolutely silent and had sort of eerie embedded lights, and so that's what I saw. And I wasn't expecting to see anything because I was looking out over at Luke to the west, and then all of a sudden these people in the park area just on the west side of 51, there were a bunch of people there. Everybody said, "Oh, look at that!" And we turned around, and this thing was coming from the northwest, traveling to the southeast.
We now know, and it really hit me when we were watching the Diamondbacks in Game 7, and the B-1 flew over. Over the Bob.
Yeah, it wasn't a B-1 bomber.
But that thing all of a sudden out of nowhere appears. And, I said to somebody that night, I said, well, when they do test these, they test them in populated areas. They're new stuff. They test it to see if people detect it. Do you believe it was ours? Do you believe it was something from the U.S. government that they were kind of flying around?
No, it wasn't even close to a B. It was much bigger than a B-1. A B-1 actually isn't that big. I mean,
right.
I mean, if it's at low altitude, it'll appear big, but no, this was totally different.
Something, though, that you think our own government may have been kind of running by a populated area to see what would happen?
Well, they certainly achieved their goal of stirring the pot, if that's what they were doing. But I don't think so. I think this was technologically far advanced. I use the analogy. Can you imagine if you took Christopher Columbus and put him in the cockpit of a Boeing 777? What his reaction would be? He wouldn't understand it. He would be convinced that this is something from another world,
Is that what?
And I really believe that. I believe that. But I've always been open to that. We're not alone in the universe.
I agree with you.
We're going to find that out one way or the other. Even Bill Clinton was talking about that the other day on the national news.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I do believe that we're not alone. I just don't know that we've been visited. But you think maybe that night we were?
I think so, yeah. There have been so many different sort of sightings and inexplicable phenomena that, But the disparity in terms of technological progress would be so vast that we would be, I think, of sort of no consequence to whoever is visiting us, because the technology to get here would be just beyond anything we could imagine.
Did it hover?
No, it was just going in a straight line.
Slow pace?
Yeah, slow pace, yeah. And then, you know, there were all the sightings.
Flares.
There were the sightings of the America West plane coming into Sky Harbor, said he could have landed on it.
It was enormous.
Yeah.
Like an aircraft carrier in the sky? Is that about as close as you could?
I think that's a fair description,
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Maybe it's our next generation we're working on. Who knows?
Well, we'll find out it someday.